Hello and welcome to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. In this video, we are going to update and upgrade our Morophon the Boundless Shapeshifter with Changeling EDH deck, one of the many decks that currently resides in the Burgeoning Commander catalog. What's up, MTGBC? You are the MTG Burgeoning community. Welcome to another installment of the Up and Up series, and today we are going to once again update and upgrade our Morophon the Boundless Shapeshifter with Changeling EDH deck. In the description below, you can click the link to tappedout.net where you can see the entire deck list and the Changeling pool as it stands right now. So in this video today, we are going to make a change to the actual deck, and we have some doings afoot. There are some challengers to some of the current incumbents in the Changeling pool, and I'm happy to report that we have some overthrown tribal representatives. We have identified and obtained copies of some creatures that are more powerful than the current tribal incumbents, and these usurpers are going to take the spots of the current tribal incumbents. More on that to come in this video. Let's begin with the one change to the deck itself. All right, coming in to the, well, we're going to say the 99, but I mean, really, it's just the 87 and then 12 cards from the Changeling pool. Again, you can check out the tappedout.net page for a further explanation as to exactly what the Changeling pool is as it pertains to this deck itself. What it really is that we have 12, I guess we could call them placeholder cards in this deck. And at the beginning of every game that we sit down to and play with this Shapeshifter with Changeling deck, we most of the time randomly pull 12 cards from the Changeling pool, each one a different tribal representative, with the goal of having the most unique play experiences every single time we sit down with the Shapeshifter with Changeling deck, because the Changelings are every creature type at all times, so let's make sure that no game is ever the same. That's why we have our Changeling pool right here. We have 94 different tribal representatives in this Changeling pool at this moment, and we're going to have, as I said earlier, there's going to be some flipping and flopping. But before we get to that point, let's talk about the one card going into the actual deck, which will stay in there statically as long as it does the things that I'm expecting it to do and have the power level that I'm hoping for. The card going in is Volo, Itinerant Scholar. Okay, so we have a 2/3 Legendary Human Wizard for 2 and a blue mana. When Volo ETBs, we get to create Volo's Journal, a legendary colorless artifact token with hexproof, and it has, whenever we cast a creature spell, note one of its creature types that hasn't been noted for this artifact. We can pay 2, tap Volo, and then we can draw a card for each creature type noted for target permanent we control named Volo's Journal. So what we're looking to do here is we're looking to get more cards in our hand so that we don't run out of gas during a game, early to mid and into late game, of course. Maintaining tempo in a deck like this is very, very important, because when we're trying to win with a tribal build, you can run out of cards in your hand very, very quickly. So the goal here is to get Volo into play. Now, keep in mind, we don't have to cast him in order to get Volo's Journal. We just need Volo to enter the battlefield. So how this is going to work is we're going to get Volo into play. We're going to create Volo's Journal. And then whenever we cast one of our Changelings, we're going to note one of any number of different creature types possible. For the purposes of the ultimate strategy, of course, we want to make sure that we continue to be as I don't know, creative with our creature types as possible. Like, even if we know we don't have specific creature types represented in the Changeling pool or in the current 99 of the build, then we want to name creature types that we know aren't going to come up later in the game. That won't be a problem for the shapeshifters with Changeling. That may be a bit of a problem when we pull the 12 different tribal representatives from the Changeling pool. So you just keep note of it, and even if we can get just two, even if we can just get two counters on this, two different creatures, turning that hexproof artifact sideways, tapping 2 mana and drawing 2 cards, I'll tell you, there's a lot worse ways that you can get 2 cards in your hand just by paying 2 mana and tapping an artifact that protects itself. So we're going to see through gameplay experience if Volo Itinerant Scholar's presence in the 99 of this build is going to be a positive, or if we're going to have to go back and reevaluate exactly its, if we're going to evaluate its efficiency and effectiveness in this deck. So with Volo coming into the main deck, 1 card has to come out, and the card coming out is going to be Volatile Claws. It's an instant for 2 and a red, and until end of our turn, creatures we control get +2/+0 and gain all creature types. So what was going to come down to this, or probably the Shields of Valis Vel. And the shields stay because that's a very, very easy instant that we can tutor for, because it is a tribal instant. For Volatile Claws, the +2/+0 is a nice feature, and we have added over the last few installments of the Up and Up series with respect to Morophon and the Shapeshifter deck here, we have added a lot of outlets for token creation. But the +2/+0, it just doesn't seem like it's a big enough bang for our buck. And by keeping the mana value similar, this card has a mana value of 3, Volo is a mana value of 3. We kind of keep the same mana investment, but we're looking for a bigger return on what the overall card is going to do for the synergy of the deck. So with that in mind, Volatile Claws is going to come out for Volo, and we're going to see how it rolls. Where we may regret pulling this card, and we're going to have to keep an eye on this, of course. We may regret pulling this card because we're going to lose an instant spell that lets all of our creatures become all creature types. We do run Maskwood Nexus in the main deck. That is our closer. That's one of the closers we have in this build. We do have, that is really our goal, is to get the Maskwood Nexus into play and have every single creature synergize with itself, and then we end the game with 1 massive combat. Without the Maskwood Nexus, Shields of Valis Vel will do what Maskwood Nexus does in a minimalistic way, but again, that's just for the end of turn, similar to Volatile Claws. So where we may see a bit of a void is trying to get all of those creatures to become online with each other, which is something that Volatile Claws provided. So we're going to keep an eye on that just to make sure we don't want to overall weaken the main interaction synergy of the deck by trying to provide additional tempo. So we'll keep an eye on that, and if needed in a future Up and Up installment, we'll talk about it, and we'll get rid of Volo if needed, or we'll find a different way to get Volatile Claws back into the deck. Alright, so that's the one change going into the actual deck. Now let's talk about some overthrowing. Yes, it is time. We have identified and obtained copies of some tribal challengers that, when put next to the current incumbent of that same tribe, there really isn't much room for discussion. So let's talk about the Vampire Tribe. The current Vampire Tribe representative is Captivating Vampire. It's a 2/2 for 1 in double black. It has the Lord effect of giving other vampires we control +1/+1, and we can tap 5 untapped vampires we control to gain control of target creature, and that creature becomes a vampire in addition to its other types. So in our world, in a game where we want to win in combat by sending creatures into combat, turning them sideways most of the time, outside of the +1/+1 effect that the Captivating Vampire gives us, we also have to have at least 4 other vampires or 4 other shapeshifters with Changeling to stay untapped so we can turn the Captivating Vampire and those 4 other Changelings sideways to gain control of a creature on the battlefield. that kind of slows down what we're trying to do. I mean, it can act as a deterrent for an opponent to put one of their powerful creatures onto the battlefield. It could act as a deterrent for one of our opponents to get their commander onto the battlefield. But for us, we don't really want to be too reactive. We want to be proactive. And Captivating Vampire's replacement is going to help us do that in spades. All right, so the Captivating Vampire is officially out as tribal representative of the vampires. Taking its spot is Evelyn the Covetous. Here we have a 2/5 vampire rogue for 2 generic and any combination of 2 Grixis colors and a black mana. It also has Flash, so let's not overlook the ability of Flash here, because we could really take our opponents by surprise. When Evelyn or another vampire enters the battlefield under our control, we exile the top card of each player's library with a collection counter on it. And once each turn, we may play a card from exile with a collection counter on it if it was exiled by an ability we controlled, and we may spend mana as though it were let's try that one more time. We may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast it. So we're in a 5-color deck, so we shouldn't have any trouble casting any spells even without that last ability. But what Evelyn is providing us is a way in which to get more value, more tempo, more spells to cast, creating greater extensions of our own hand. And this is whenever she or another vampire ETBs on our side of the battlefield. Remember, all of our shapeshifters with Changeling are also vampires. So when they come into play, cards are going to get exiled with those collection counters, and then we're going to get to pick and choose and cast them how we want once each turn. And if we're lucky and fortunate, maybe there are some instant spells that we're able to cast during our opponent's turns if we have the mana available to do it. What Evelyn is going to do better than what Captivating Vampire does is it's going to provide us more options for populating our side of the battlefield, more options of spell casting, and just does more for the overall game than the Captivating Vampire can. So with that in mind, Evelyn is in. CV, you're out. You're just not that captivating anymore. All right, the next tribe to have a turnover in leadership, it is the Archer tribe. The current Archer tribal leader is the Great Bow Doyen, a 2/4 elf archer for 4 and a green mana. Similar to Captivating Vampire, this is a static ability of a lord that gives other archers +1/+1. And whenever an archer we control deals damage to a creature, that archer deals that much damage to that creature's controller. This is a pretty good ability because it kind of makes the opponents in combat really think about whether they even want to block, because let's face it, they're still going to take that damage. And if those blocking creatures can't kill our attacking creatures, then there really is no point for them to block anyways. So the +1/+1 ability is okay. I mean, this is a mana value 5 for a Lord effect, which is a little pricey. The ability to deal that combat damage directly to the creature's controller if they are blocked, well, that's a very nice ability as well. So there's going to have to be something in here that's going to have to help us to really solidify the battlefield, because the ability that the Great Bow Doyen would give us is not something that we could so easily turn our nose up at. With that in mind, and the double preposition ending, you heard it, right? Turn our nose up at. Double preposition ending. Taking the place of Great Bow Doyen is Ohaba Kaliria, a 1/3 elf archer for 1 in Selesnya colors. It has reach, and we can untap all archers we control during each other player's untap step. Right there is a very, very powerful ability for us, because again, the primary path to victory in this deck is through combat. Yes, we do have some ways in which to give our armies vigilance, but that's not always going to be a guarantee. So if we need to send our creatures into combat to win, we do leave ourselves susceptible for potential crackbacks. Ohaba Kaliria allows us to untap those creatures so that we have the blockers necessary to kind of dissuade our opponents from attacking. Very, very good ability, and one we should not overlook. And we're not done yet, because the last wall of text there makes Ohaba even more valuable. Whenever an archer we control deals damage to a creature, we may pay 2, and if we do, we draw a card. So here we are still forcing our opponents to make a decision on combat, but this time it's so much more beneficial to us. If we have the mana open and we send our creatures into combat, do our opponents dare block them? Because if they do, we're going to put more cards into our hand. So this leaves our opponents with the thought, what's gonna hurt me more, losing a few life here or a few life there, or putting more cards into this Shapeshifter with Changeling's pilot's hand? That, in combination with untapping all of our archers at the beginning of or during each other player's untap step, makes Ohabi Kalaria so much more valuable than the Great Bo Doyen, in addition to a 40% reduction on the mana value. That, to me, was a very easy swap once we line those two archers up. All right, we got a few more challengers going in, and the next tribe that's having some upheaval, it's the Assassin Tribe. The current Assassin tribal leader is Scarblade Elite, a 2/2 elf assassin for 2 black mana. We can tap and exile an assassin card from our graveyard to destroy target creature. So some spot removal, as long as we can turn this sideways and we have an assassin in our graveyard to exile, and we can off-target creature. All right, a couple of points about this card before we even talk about its triumphant replacements. We have to wait for a turn for it to activate its ability, because it's going to come in and it's going to have summoning sickness, so we can't tap it right away. We must have an assassin or a changeling in the graveyard in order to do that. And although sometimes it is a good idea to lose one of our changelings to exile in order to destroy another creature, let's face it, exiling too many of our changelings from the graveyard, if they're there, is going to hurt us mid to late game, because let's face it, our mass recursion spells or any other recursive synergies that we've built into the deck and or the changeling pool, well, that's going to take a hit. So we do have a reasonable suite of removal in the deck already. So losing what Scarblade Elite can do by the way of destroying target creature is not really that bad, considering to what we're going to gain through its replacement. So with the Scarblade Elite out, the new Assassin tribal leader is Ramses Assassin Lord. And folks, this isn't even close. We have a 4/4 legendary human assassin for 2 Indemir colors. It has Death Touch. It gives other assassins +1/+1. And whenever a player loses the game, if they were attacked this turn by an assassin we control, we win the game. Let that sink in for a second. Let's separate that last wall of text from what Ramses does to the battlefield. It's a 4/4 with Death Touch for 4 mana. Those are great returns. The Anthem effect is nice, +1/+1. That last ability, however, whenever a player loses the game, if they were attacked this turn by an assassin we controlled, we win the game. There could be 2 or 3 other opponents with 5,000 life each, and as long as we send at least one assassin at opponent number 5 or opponent number 4 or whoever, and we deal enough combat damage to kill that person, even if that assassin did not deal combat damage, we win the game. This is a win condition, a specific assassin-laden win condition that is going to find a permanent spot in the Changeling pool, because let's face it, our primary path to victory is combat. Ramses, Assassin Lord, gives us the opportunity to make that combat so much shorter with that you win the game ability. An amazing card to go into the Changeling pool, and honestly, a very hard card to keep out of the static deck itself. All right, we have just 3 more tribal turnovers to talk about, and then this video is going to come to a close. The next tribe up, the Demon Tribe. The current... wait a second. We got a little bit of a synergy problem here. Or symmetry problem, I should say. Yeah, that's better. The current Demon... there we go. The current demon tribal leader is Bloodspeaker. It's a 3/2 Ogre Shaman for 3 and a black. At the beginning of our upkeep, we may sacrifice Bloodspeaker, and if we do, we search our library for a demon card, reveal it, put it into our hand, and then we shuffle. Whenever a demon ETBs under our control, we can return Bloodspeaker from our graveyard to our hand. So what we have with Bloodspeaker is a way in which that we can sacrifice it, search our library for one of our changelings. Our changelings are also demons. Get that into our hand. Then we cast a changeling, and then we return Bloodspeaker from our graveyard back to our hand, get it back into play, sacrifice it again. It's a way in which to continuously get more and more changelings from our library into our hand and then cast onto the battlefield. That cycle, it takes a little bit of time. It really does. And although Bloodspeaker could be valuable in the way in which by thinking that we can populate our side of the battlefield continuously, getting cards into our hand, it's a fragile cycle. He could get popped off and sent to the graveyard before we can sacrifice him, or he could stay there for a little while. Or if anybody exiles our graveyard or something like that, then we lose what Bloodspeaker can do best. I'm not detracting his abilities. They are good abilities. He's in the Changeling pool for a reason. However, Bloodspeaker's time as the demon representative is now over because a demon has come into play with demon synergies that's going to do what Bloodspeaker does better, more efficiently, and more effectively. And that is Be'lakor the Dark Master, a 6/5 legendary demon noble with flying for 3 in Grixis colors. When Be'lakor ETBs, we draw X cards and lose X life, where X is the number of demons we control. So right off the bat, let's say we have 3 other changelings on our side of the battlefield. Be'lakor ETBs, remember, he doesn't have to be cast, he just has to ETB. We put 4 cards into our hand. We do lose the 4 life, but we're prepared to manage that. It would take us 4 cycles of turns for Bloodspeaker to get 4 different hand-picked cards from our library into our hand. Now, those cards are only going to be our changelings, and let's be honest, there are many underpowered and underwhelming changelings in the deck because, let's face it, there aren't a huge pool of changelings from which to draw power. But Be'lakor can come in and put more cards into our hand just by ETBing than Bloodspeaker could over a round of many, many turns. But we're not done yet. There is still one more block of text that makes Be'lakor even better. Whenever another demon ETBs under our control, again, any one of our changelings, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. This is like a Terror of the Peaks specific for demons. All of our changelings are demons. Can you imagine that this could be looked at as another potential win condition, similar to what we were talking about with Ramsey's Assassin Lord? Because that is an actual win condition. With Be'lakor and a bevy of other creatures in our graveyard, and perhaps we also control a Maskwood Nexus, giving them all creature types at all times, we cast one of our mass recursion spells, get every single creature from our graveyard right into play, and then we just pick and choose who we're going to kill. Be'lakor, the Dark Master, gives us card draw, which gives us tempo, which gives us gas, which gives us power, and it gives us another game-winning ability. Now, this is a little bit outside of our combat-laden themes to victory because we could potentially win the game through direct damage. Be'lakor, in a lot of ways, is so much better than what Bloodspeaker was giving the Changeling pool that making this swap was not that difficult at all. All right, another pretty easy swap as we move into creature tribe number 5. This is the bird tribe, currently being represented by Soulcatcher's Eyrie. Not a creature. This is an enchantment that is the current tribal leader. So we have an enchantment for 1 and a white, and whenever a bird is put into our graveyard from play, we put a feather counter on Soulcatcher's Eyrie, and then all birds get +1/+1 for each feather counter on it. The birds, that's all us all the time, because again, all of our changelings, they have all of our shapeshifters have changelings, so they're birds as well. So this was a way in which to build up some big-time +1/+1 anthem effects on an enchantment that, let's face it, enchantments are tougher to remove from the battlefield than creatures are. And that's a good thing, and I don't know exactly how much this card is going to be missed when we talk about what the card is that's going to replace it. And as a slight, and this is a very slight detraction, it did and has come up in the past during games, the all birds get +1/+1 for each feather counter on it. That also fuels our opponent's birds, and it's not like a bird tribal is a huge deal, but it has come into play, and it has been a slight detriment at times. So we're going to take out a card that has minimal impact outside of having numerous of our changelings hit the graveyard from the battlefield, and a card that also could help our opponents. So with the bird tribe representative coming out in Soulcatcher's Eyrie, taking its place is Tawnos the Toymaker. It's a 3/5 human artificer for 3 in Simic colors. It's also legendary. Whenever we cast a beast or bird creature spell, we may copy it, except the copy is an artifact in addition to its other types. So, we could have picked beast or birds for Tawnos to go up against to replace, but the current beast tribe representative, the Wirewood Savage, has the ability for us to draw a card whenever a beast ETBs. That is too valuable of an ability to overthrow by Tawnos. However, it is not too valuable to replace Soulcatcher's Eyrie. Remember, when we cast our shapeshifters with Changeling, they are birds, so we may copy that, putting 2 of them onto the battlefield. Granted, one of the copies is an artifact, but still, we're going to get 2 out of 1, and that's going to help us because, let's face it, we are a creature-laden deck. We need creatures on our side of the battlefield to win, and Tawnos the Toymaker is going to help us get those creatures by doubling up the spells of birds that we cast. So Tawnos is in, and Soulcatcher's Eyrie, you are out. All right, MTG we are down to our last change in leadership, and this time it's through the Insect Tribe. Coming out as the current incumbent is Grist, the Hunger Tide, the only planeswalker that used to be in the Changeling pool. Well, now it's coming out. It was a planeswalker for 1 in Golgari colors. It hit the battlefield with 3 loyalty counters, and as long as Grist is not on the battlefield, it's a 1/1 insect creature in addition to its other types. So we could +1 Grist to create a 1/1 black and green insect creature token, and then we mill a card. If that card was an insect card, then we put another loyalty counter on Grist and repeat this process. That was an ability that, for all of the times that Grist was on our side of the battlefield, was quite lackluster. The deck is not a deck that has 45 different changelings in it, so milling 1 card with the hope of getting another card milled and another loyalty counter, we were very, very rarely ever going to pull that off. The second ability, taking off 2 loyalty counters and sacrificing a creature, when we do, we destroy target creature or planeswalker. So we lose abilities on Grist, and we have to sacrifice a creature to get rid of a creature. Yes, the majority of our changelings that are going to be on our side of the battlefield are going to be less powerful than most of our opponent's creatures, and trading one of ours for one of them, it seems like it's a reasonable exchange, but we also have to take off 2 loyalty counters on Grist, and we have to make him a lot more susceptible to being killed. And then lastly, we can -5, and each opponent loses life equal to the number of creature cards in our graveyard. Again, we don't have tons and tons of creatures to float into the graveyard. We don't have 40+ creatures that are stomping around the 99 of this deck. So Grist was, albeit a weak tribal representative, he did, represent the insect tribe during his time in the Changeling pool, but now we found one that is going to be so much better for what we're doing in this deck, and one that we can absolutely say is an upgrade to the overall position. Why are we so fuzzy here with this camera? And going in Grist's spot is Zask, Skittering Swarmlord, a 5/5 legendary insect for 3 and 2 green. We may play lands and cast insect spells from our graveyard. Right there, that allows our graveyard to be an extension of our hand, and as opposed to having to fill the graveyard to satisfy Grist, we can use a graveyard to satisfy our battlefield. Right then and there, that swap with that ability by itself is enough to make Zask an overwhelming improvement over Grist, but we're not done yet. Whenever another insect we control dies, we get to put that on the bottom of our library, and then we mill 2 cards. So then we can pay. So when our creatures are dying, they're not always going to hit the graveyard if Zask is on our side of the battlefield. But we are going to end up milling those 2 cards. But those 2 cards that go in, we could play lands and cast other changelings because of Zask's other ability. And then lastly, we can pay 1 and a black and 1 or a green. Yes, 1 in a black or 1 in a green, and then target insect gets +1/+0 and gains death touch until end of turn. That is going to create combat shenanigans. It's going to make our opponents really think about attacking into us if we have Zask, and it's going to make them think about whether or not they want to block when we send our changelings into combat. All of these abilities combined are so much better for what we're looking for out of our deck that replacing Zask with Grist was a decision that was easier than Sunday morning, folks. Whew, all right, and there you have it. Updating and upgrading our Morophon the Boundless Shapeshifter with Changeling EDH deck. Again, one of the decks that currently resides in the Burgeoning Commander catalog. And I don't know why the camera is looking fuzzy from this vantage point. All right, so let me know about these changes in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic.